switchblades, automatic knives out the front, the most illegal knives ever. How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And today we're talking about this guy. This is the Hogue Counterstrike, and it's an out the front switchblade. We've been on a roll with these lately, and I've checked out microtechs, I've checked out cheaper brands, and it's time that we talk about another American-made out the front automatic knife. It's starting, in my opinion, it's starting to become the US knife. Did you know that you can't actually order legally? You can't import a pre-built Chinese-made out the front knife. They have to send the parts here, and then they have to be assembled here. And it creates for some very, very weird overseas relationships. People say, yes, it's an American-made knife, but you find out that it was actually made in China and then assembled here, which is not exactly the same thing. But today, we're talking about a truly American-made OTF knife. And it's premium, and it's pricey. But is it worth it? Today, we are going to find out. This is the Hogue Counterstrike. Let's go. All right, everybody, so let's go ahead and start talking about the Hogue Counterstrike, and we'll go ahead and pop this open. Inside the box, you get some paperwork on the limited warranty, you get a Hogue sticker, and some extra goodies like this. Just kidding. And an extra screw. I think that's for the pocket clip. Don't quote me. Now, what you're really after is here inside this pouch. So, without too much fanfare, here you go. This is the Hogue Counterstrike. And this knife is going to cost somewhere in the realm of $297 at Blade Ops. That's kind of the running price no matter where you buy it, to be honest, but this one came from Blade Ops, and on this side you get G10 and on this side you get aluminum. It's a nice marriage between the two materials. They're both good, and adding G10 to one side actually helps keep it on the lightweight side. I gotta say right off the bat, I'm a huge fan of this pocket clip. That pocket clip is both simple and effective, and it doesn't get in the way of the ergos. I can get a full 4-finger grip on here, so plenty of purchase is available. This is a really slender drop point style blade, but they do make these in different blade shapes. So if this isn't really your flavor, you know, the good news is that you can pick a different blade shape. And also, if you don't like G10 and aluminum, they do make this with a carbon fiber variant. I'm a really big fan of this grind pattern. I don't know how to explain it. It's like air waves just converging on the handle scales. That's nice. There is a ton of screws in here, but honestly, on an OTF, I don't mind more body screws. Speaking of that hardware, you'll notice that they are in fact standard. They're standard hardware. They're standard Torx. So if you're brave and if you feel like it, you can in fact take this apart. I don't suggest it. I really don't. If you're going to learn how to take apart an OTF, my suggestion would actually be to just go buy a cheap one. Get used to the springs and the mechanism, and that way, if you screw it up, you're not sending the manufacturer a bucket of parts and saying, oops, my bad. It does, in fact, have an attitude adjuster, a glass breaker, which could be useful if you're someone like a first responder. Now, keep in mind, first responders are often very big fans of OTFs because they're quick in the action. You can actuate them one-handed in case your hands are busy doing something else. And then, in that application, I do think that that's useful if you're a first responder. Now, 99% of the rest of us are not. But if you are, yes, that could be useful. I do think that this pocket clip could actually be flipped pretty easily to the other side for you lefties, which makes it ambidextrous. And you probably want to know what I think about that action. First and foremost, it is very, very smooth. It's very composed too. And I say composed, I don't mean that it's a light action. It definitely deploys with some force. The switch is easier to deploy than it is on a microtech, but that's not a very high bar to clear given how difficult microtechs can be to deploy for the average person. You got to get those thumb muscles going, you know? And for everyone else who doesn't, microtechs are hard to deploy, but this one feels a lot easier. Now, the deployment is very smooth, and you get much more kick on the retraction of that blade. I actually think that this looks beautiful. I love how slender that blade looks. And I know I'm saying slender, but the fact of the matter is it's not really that much thinner than a microtech. And because it's hard to do an OTF video without actually showing a microtech, here's my ultratech for comparison. And I figured that this might actually be better than just pulling out the ruler and, measuring stuff, because that never really tells you. But if you have a microtech and you're looking at a Hogue, this is a nice comparison. It compares directly against the microtech ultratech. Directly, like they are actual competitors in a lot of different ways. M390, 20 CV, aluminum, and G10. This actually feels... They feel pretty similar in weight, but if I had to say which one was heavier, I'd probably say the microtech is heavier. Now, remember that switch? Left-handed is actually really difficult for me on the microtech. On this one, left-handed, a lot easier. So the deployment and retraction on here is going to be easier than your standard microtech. Again, that should be no surprise, right? I am not a huge fan of this glass breaker for most people. And I think that originally, my thought that this had been for the pocket clip was correct, but I think that that extra screw actually eliminates the glass breaker, which is nice because at the end of the day, if you're not a first responder and you're not someone that is constantly in fear of needing to break out of your car or smash a window and not be able to do it, then, having this is really kind of pointless with the glass breaker. I don't need that. Now, certain self-defense people can tell you that this could be used as an impact point for non-lethal self-defense, but if I'm carrying this knife and I'm using it anyways, I'm going to go ahead and use this end. So I'm going to suggest to anyone that buys this that if you're not a first responder or someone that actually uses a glass breaker on a somewhat semi-regular basis, go ahead and replace that with the screw that is in the box. I am about 99.9% sure that's what that extra screw is for, since it's not going to fit any of these other hardware pieces. This feels classy. It's really slick on the action. The deployment is good. The pocket clip is very functional, and it has premium materials. Did I mention that it's made in the US of A? Hogue, for most people, is known as a company that makes grips for firearms, but they also do a pretty bang-up job making knives. And this one is no exception. This is one of many different out-the-front switchblades that they make, and I think they did a pretty decent job. I actually really enjoy this drop point blade, even though I tend to be a fan of dagger style blades on OTFs. This just seems to make more sense because you can actually choke up here on the spine of the blade. As far as blade play, I would say it actually has less than a microtech ultratech. That's not even a comparison. Honestly, it feels solid. Microtech doesn't have the most solid lockup. And this is kind of a measuring stick when it comes to OTFs, because OTFs are known to not have solid lockups unless you're going to spend, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, whatever a Grant and Gavin Hawk deadlock is going for. This is going to be a really, really good option. Now, I'm going to pull this out one more time for comparison. So we've got the Hogue Counterstrike, the microtech ultratech, and what the hey, we'll go ahead and throw in another out the front knife from Blade Ops. This is the SOS out the front. just to give you a nice comparison there. As you can see, it's a nice and slender handle scale. It's easy to get a good grip, and the G10 actually lends to its ergonomics. Ergonomically speaking, this feels really, really good in the hands. It's quick to deploy. It does not jam up. The action is reliable, and you get a really decent grind on that edge bevel, which means that right out of the box, it's going to be useful. I mean, OTFs are known to be pretty thick down towards the edge. Like for example, this one is very thick down behind the edge. So the ultratechs don't necessarily slice as well. This one is not going to be an issue. It's going to slice really, really nicely. And I think that this creates a good talking point, because when it comes to American-made knives, microtech has kind of dominated the out the front market in the United States. You might not know this, but in order to get an out the front knife into the US, those other countries that make them, they have to send them in parts buckets, and then they have to be assembled here in the US, versus something like this Hogue Counterstrike, which is made here in the US. Everything from the handle scales, the blade being 20 CV, that's CPM 20 CV, which is made by Crucible Industries here in the United States. This is an excellent, excellent example of an American-made knife. And I think that you could do a lot worse for the money, especially at the $300 price point. You're paying to get a knife that was not just well built, but also well designed, and you're paying for that American manufacturing. So if you're someone that wants something that not only looks premium and feels premium, but it also performs well with a warranty, here you go. I'm also a big fan of the fact that you get that replacement screw for the pocket clip for the normal guy that does not work as a first responder. If you're a first responder, I 100% understand why this would be useful. If you're a firefighter or a police officer, yeah, being able to break glass in case of emergency makes sense, because you're in an emergency all the time. But for the rest of us, I don't really feel like we need that attitude adjuster. Guys, I cannot wait to do my Grail or Garbage ranking video on this. I am really excited about that, and that will be coming out in about a week or so. Until then, make sure to stay tuned, and let me know in the comments section down below. Do you like OTFs? Are they a gimmick to you? Do you see the usefulness in them, or are you just tired of paying the OTF tax, which is a hefty price tag to get a knife that is otherwise, a really cool piece of equipment? Let me know if you want to see the Grail or Garbage ranking for this, because this is going to line up on our premium leaderboard for Grail or Garbage. Make sure you hit subscribe, tap that notification bell, and I will see you on the flip side.